kind is everything that we've drawn on the board. It's called a proper fraction. Right? A proper fraction. So an example of a proper fraction would be like what we talked about, 1/2. The reason this is proper is because the top number, the numerator, is less than the denominator, the bottom number. So when you have a top number less than a bottom number, then it's called proper. Now, the reason we say this is because there's something called an improper fraction. And that is when you have the numerator larger than the denominator. Let's say we have 4/3. This is a perfectly fine fraction to have, but you just need to think about a little bit what this actually means. What it means is, I cut a pizza into 3 pieces, okay? Let's do that. Let's say I have a pizza right here, and I cut them into 3 equal pieces. So here I believe is going to be pretty close to 3 equal pieces. 1, 2, 3 equal pieces, right? So what this is saying is I go over to the table where I've cut this pizza into 3 pieces, and I take 1 piece away, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, but here I'm being told that I actually have 4 pieces. So what this means is that actually there's another pizza here that I've also cut into 3 pieces, and to get my 4th piece, I actually take it from another pizza. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense at first, and that's sort of why we call it improper, because most fractions that you're going to deal with, you're taking away fewer pieces than you have. But if I have something like this, then what it really is telling me is that I took 3 of my pieces away from here, and I had to take a 4th piece from someplace else. But in each case, I divided the pizza into 3 pieces. So what it really is telling me is, in this case, I have more than 1 whole pizza sitting in my desk or sitting in my chair. I have the 1 pizza from here, and then I took a little piece of another pizza. So when you have any improper fraction where the top number is bigger, basically it means you have more than 1 of something. And that is why we call it improper, because fractions really are meant to describe when you have less than 1. But you can certainly write it like this, and it just means you have more than 1 of something. Which brings me to the third kind of fraction that you'll need to know, which is called a mixed fraction. If I were going to write this thing in terms of a mixed fraction, I would write it as 3 1/3. 3 1/3. Actually, I said the wrong thing. I would write it as 1 1/3. So a mixed fraction is when you have a whole number out in front plus another little fraction sitting off to the side. So what this means, this mixed fraction, is that I have 1 whole pizza at my desk, that's this pizza, plus 1/3 of another pizza. That's what this is. Now, I've chosen this stuff very carefully because 1 1/3 pieces of pizza is exactly the same as 4/3. And I'm going to show you a little bit later how to convert back and forth between improper and mixed. So don't worry about that right now, about how to actually know when these things are equal to each other. That's okay. We're going to get to that. But for now, all I want you to know is that a proper fraction is when the top number is smaller than the bottom. An improper fraction is when the top number is bigger than the bottom. And a mixed fraction is when I have a whole number out in front plus some fraction over here. So that's really all I want to say here. Now, to get to the meat and potatoes of this course, we're going to need to go ahead and work a lot of examples. So what we're going to do next, I'm going to write a fraction down, and you're going to need to, or we are together going to figure out if they're proper, improper, or if they're a mixed fraction. We're going to write that down. And we're also going to find out if a fraction is undefined. And I'm going to get to that as we get to an example there. All right. First, let's go in and look at an example. What if I have 2 1/4 as a fraction? What kind of fraction is it? Is it proper, improper, or mixed fraction? Well, this is a mixed fraction. All it means is I have 2 whole pizzas plus 1/4 of another pizza. That's all it means. What if I have 5 1/9? This is also a mixed fraction because it's telling me I have 5 pizzas plus 1 out of 9 pieces of another pizza. All right? Let's say I have the simple fraction 1/4. What kind of fraction is that? That's a proper fraction because the bottom number is smaller than the top. The top number is smaller than the bottom. What if I have -3/4? Don't worry about the fact that it's negative. That's fine. Bottom number is smaller The top number is smaller than the bottom, so it's a proper fraction. Okay? What about 7/4? Now in this case, everything's flipped over because the top number is actually bigger than the bottom, so this is improper. Okay? And what about 2/3? Top number is smaller, so that is proper. That's a proper fraction. What about -5/1? That is an improper fraction because they're bigger on the top. So that's improper. Okay, what about 5/0? Now this is a special case, and I wanted to sort of wait until we get to this point. Don't forget, and I don't think I even really told you this here, fractions are describing the part that you have out of the whole number of pieces. This means that I have 5 pieces, but I didn't actually cut the pizza up into anything. I have 0 pieces that I cut the pizza up into, so I really don't have anything to begin with. It's really kind of a weird situation. Another way to think of it is all fractions are basically division. When you have a number on top and a number on bottom, it's exactly the same thing as writing division. So this is like 5 divided by 0, which is 5 divided by nothing. So anytime you have a 0 on the bottom, you can't divide by 0. You're going to get an error in your calculator. And so what you need to write down if you ever see a fraction with 0 on the bottom is this is undefined. Because how you would put this in your calculator is 5 divided by 0. You can't do that. And when you get into later math, you'll learn that this is infinity because you're dividing 5 divided by 0, which is divided by nothing at all. So you get a very, very large number. It's so large that it's really called undefined. So that's what we talk about. So one thing I want to drill in before we go any farther, don't forget that fractions are basically like division. You know, right here we have 1 divided by 2, but you know, you can do that in your calculator and get a decimal, that's fine, but you're not going to really be able to divide that evenly. But if you have something like, you know, 8/2, then you can just do this division, 8 divided by 2, and that's going to give you 4, because 2 times 4 is 8. So don't forget that fractions are basically sort of division. So when you think of it in terms of division, 5 divided by 0, it's really not going to give you anything that you can put into your calculator. And we're going to talk about this whole thing about fractions being division here a little bit more detail here in just a few problems. All right, so let's say we have the fraction 8/7, or 8 divided by 7 is another way to think of it. Well, that's improper because you have a bigger number on top, so that's improper. Okay, and what about 0 divided by 8? Now, if a 0 is on the top, that's okay, because if you take 0 and divide by 8, you're just going to get 0. So that's something your calculator can do. That's a proper fraction. Because the top number is bigger than the top number is smaller than the bottom number. So it falls in line with the same thing as, you know, this fraction here. The top number is smaller. The top number is smaller. The top number is smaller, so those are all proper. It's only when the 0 is on the bottom that when you try to do that division, you're not going to get anything, so it's undefined. Let's look at -1/50. Well, the fact that it's negative has nothing to do with it. The top number is smaller, so that is proper. It's a proper fraction. What about 9/9? 9 pieces of pizza out of 9 slices that I've cut. I have the whole pizza, in other words. I took 9 pieces, but I only cut it into 9 pieces. Well, it turns out this is improper. It doesn't mean it's a bad fraction or anything. It just means that the top number is not actually smaller. It's equal to the bottom. So if you have them both equal, just remember, for it to be proper, the top number has to actually be smaller. In this case, they're equal, so it doesn't really get you anywhere. All right. So let's review where we stand right now, because this section is going to be a whole collection of a lot of different things related to fractions that you've probably seen before, but we're going through it hopefully in a lot of detail here to really get you geared up for your algebra journey ahead. So far we've talked about a fraction being a part over a whole. You divide the pizza into 5 pieces, you take 2 pieces of pizza away, you have 2/5 of that pizza in your hand because you took 2 pieces out of 5 slices total. Okay? We've talked about the fact that you can have proper fractions, which are written like this, the normal way with the top number smaller, improper fractions when the top number is bigger, And mixed fractions, when you have sort of a whole number of pizzas out here plus a fractional piece of a pizza left over here. We've talked about the fact that these improper fractions and these mixed fractions really are describing the same thing, that those are cases when we have more than one whole pizza, and we're going to learn how to convert back and forth between these guys here in just a few minutes. Okay, now